All right. Now, last week, the IMF announced that it would loan Kenya 262 billion shillings for post-COVID economic recovery. In the last few months, the fund has given Kenya a series of loans towards similar efforts, but economists now worry that that condition stipulated by the global body could return Kenya to dark financial times witnessed in the 1990s. KTN's Brenda Kirubo looked at Kenya's relationship with the IMF and filed the following story.
The International Monetary Fund was created in 1945 to monitor exchange rates, encourage global cooperation and stabilize international money systems.
Simply put, the IMF provides loans to troubled economies in a bid to create a stable world economy. So how exactly is the fund related to Kenya?
Relations formally began on February 3, 1964, when Nairobi joined the IMF. As a member state, Kenya is required to refrain from restrictions on exchange of foreign currency, encourage openness in economic policies, and pay some money in form of subscription fees.
The best part, though, is financial support in times of economic difficulties, something Kenya is all too familiar with.
Kenya had the best economic record in the 1970s and 80s. It enjoyed regular financial support from donors and the IMF. The fund lent to Kenya using a mix of concessional and non-concessional loans, which had lower interest rates arrangements. But the fund suspended disbursements in 1991, following a decline in policy implementation occasioned by poor rainfall, weak export markets, and political unrest in the period leading up to the first multi-party elections.
The headwinds was more or less experienced in terms of exchange rate and inflation and things like that. And those are things which, because when people seem to have money, they seem to spend a lot and inflation creeps in, then the exchange rate also goes a little bit haywire, and therefore the IMF has to come in to stabilize those short-term shocks.
By 1993, Kenya was in a financial crisis, and donors refused to support President Daniel Arap Moi's administration. This led to a severe shortage in foreign exchange.
Initially, President Moi reacted by accusing the IMF of taking dictatorial measures.
Various schemes had been introduced, like export compensation schemes, pre-shipment financing, forexes and what have you. All these instruments had been hijacked by various individuals, to the extent that even institutions of government had literally been hijacked.
The then Finance Minister, Musalia Mudavadi, embarked on a major liberalization and reform program, which led to devaluation of the shilling. Inflation rose to triple digits, something that had not been witnessed in Kenya before.
The fund responded positively, and the government borrowed $63 million in December 1993.
Apart from changing some of the people who are managing the finances, that's how I came in, to eventually become Minister for Finance. And in the five years that I was there, it was nothing but cleaning up. We are also moving from a controlled regime economically. You know, it was, prices were controlled, everything was controlled by the state and so forth and so forth. And yet people wanted to have a liberal economy.
You could see that in the early 90s, the political pressure was very, very high at that particular time, because a lot of people were engaged in farming, were engaged in manufacturing, were engaged in trade, were feeling the heat and were feeling those structural adjustments which were put in by IMF.
The IMF measures were painful, but were they necessary?
IMF came the first time. The prescriptions that were given to our government were very painful. People losing jobs, people being retrenched, people being given golden handshake, and people remember that suffering. I remember as a young student, one of the things that happened that was very mysterious is the people were retrenched or went to chicken farming, and the price of eggs and chicken in Nairobi went down.
The IMF is back. It's not that it really left, it's just that this time it is after a government that is reeling from increased debt, a pandemic, and also a ballooning wage bill.
Kenya is set to receive a 262.56 billion shilling loan from the International Monetary Fund. The conditions attached to the loan include allocating expenditure to priority areas, restructuring state-owned enterprises, and raising taxes.
One of Kenya's leading optimists. So even if it is appearing as if things are going to get very bad, we still have time to turn out this economy. One, I'm very happy the weather has been very good. It has been raining for the last 3 years. The weather patterns have been very good. So you can imagine if there was no rain and there's no COVID. So the fact that the weather has been good, the fact that people are not worried about hunger is a good indicator. Number two, there are other measures we can take beyond IMF. For example, why can't we reduce the wastes in the public sector? For example, somebody has suggested we can merge some departments. There are some functions that are duplicated in the national government and in the county government. Why can't we have somebody doing that? So if we can reduce the waste, if we can become more efficient, like I like the way the government services are going online, Huduma Center and so on. So if we can become more efficient, reduce the waste, then we don't need all that money from IMF and so on.
IMF says reopening of schools and the removal of COVID restrictions will contribute to economic growth of 7.6% this year. But some key sectors of the economy are yet to recover. And as the government continues to borrow and revenues continue to decline, it will be a long road to recovery even after the COVID-19 pandemic. Brenda Kerubu, KTN News in Nairobi.
And on that note, we call it a day right here on Business Today. Thank you so much for staying with us for the latest in the world of business. I'm Brian George Otieno. My colleague Nicholas Wambua is up next with Mbiu ya KTN. Enjoy the rest of your viewing.